Hunting or Bust, The Journey Onward by Master Atlan, Chapter 56, Wolf in Tanuki Clothing. Cardin huffed and panted for air as he lifted his mace up against his opponent. He could still hear his teammates cheering for him, but even the rousing sounded desperate, and there were other people calling out his name, but it was more than they wanted to see him actually hurt his opponent, unlike what he had done so far. The bastard's aura hadn't even dipped from the green at all. His semblance was just unfair. So are you gonna keep trying to fight? Because this seems like a pretty obvious outcome at this point. Karn's opponent noted while looking up at the monitor to see how they were faring. He wasn't even bragging or deriding his opponent, but merely stating a fact. He shrugged aimlessly. Isn't constantly doing the same thing, expecting a different result, like the definition of insanity? You're insane if you think I'll give up. Is this banter? Cardin growled through his teeth and charged across the stage with his mace hoisted over his shoulder. The shorter student across from him didn't raise his large cleaver sword or even make a move to guard himself from Cardin's assault. The mace came down on the foreign student's head, and everyone flinched when it exploded on contact. They were all trying to get accustomed to the sight of water exploding in every direction when his head was knocked off. Cardin quickly raised his mace in defense as his opponent started to collect himself again. While his focus was squarely on the arm still holding the large sword, he didn't notice the water collecting and making a fist that quickly stretched out to strike his stomach. Cardin doubled over as the vacuo student finally solidified again and headed his sword onto his shoulder. He leapt forward and Cardin took a deep breath before jumping to the side. The beacon student narrowed his eyes as his opponent finally started to engage in the fight and left his sword. The armored Winchester swung his mace and knocked the massive cleaver sword aside before he could reach him. Cardin realized that while his opponent was smaller than him, he still had a surprising amount of power behind his swings. Metal clashed and sparks flew as the mace and cleaver met. Cardin gripped his handle with both hands and started attacking twice as fast, forcing the vacuo student to go on defensive and move his sword to block instead of attack. Cardin felt the swell of pride, seeing the strain and panic on his foe's face as he blocked his swings. The vacuo student jumped back when Cardin's down swing came down too forcefully and cracked into the ground. They lunged forward with their cleaver back in an attempt to catch Cardin again before the ground suddenly exploded around the mace. Cardin smirked, assured of his victory. The Winchester gagged as a whip of water came flying out towards him and wrapped around his neck. The armored student stumbled on his feet for a moment before he was suddenly pulled off of them and straight towards his opponent. The water choking him released its hold, and all the air in Cardin's lungs burst out when the back of the cleaver slammed into his chest and pinned him to the floor. Mr. Winchester's aura has fallen to the red. The winner of this spar is Mr. Hosuki. And Glinda looked down at her student, who laid on the ground and coughed before greedily taking in the air. The bespectacled professor looked towards the vacuum student with a nod. Your semblance is certainly a versatile and useful one, Mr. Hosuki, but I suggest you don't put too much reliance into it. You'll surely be blindsided if there is ever a day that it might fail you. Seems to have worked for me so far. The white-haired boy shrugged and whipped some sweat off his brow with a huff. The young vacuo huntsman latched his cleaver onto his back and dragged his feet towards the exit while smacking his lips. I'm thirsty. Miss Winchester, do you require some assistance? No. Cardin denied the older woman's help and lifted himself up before heading for the exit. All these freaky people with freaky abilities. Whoa, that was so cool. He took all of Cardin's hits and didn't even get hurt. Ruby marveled as she saw the exchange student vanish into the locker rooms. Miss Goodwitch was correct. That is a very useful semblance. His entire body is made up from water when getting attacked. That renders physical injuries completely ineffective, and he can reform with little to no effort shown. Hypothetically, the only way to beat him would be to deplete his aura, Ren theorized, but that would require actually hitting him, and that's impossible while his body is liquid. Quite a difficult opponent indeed. So what you're saying is that he's pretty much invincible? No one is invincible, Imperial immediately answered without thinking. The redhead blinked in surprise before looking around to see her friend staring at her oddly. Her face took on a deep hue before she stuttered. I mean, I know I'm not exactly be the best appropriate person to say that, but it is true. You just have to be very persistent and careful, and probably have a plan going into the fight also. So he's pretty much invincible. Naruto reiterated as Pierre continued to mutter the qualities needed to take on a seemingly unbeatable enemy. The whiskered boy smirked as his ears jumped on his head, and he saw the same interest in some of their faces too. I kind of want to find him myself. He's evil, pure evil. I can see it in his eyes, a deep, drowning darkness that knows no limits. He is death incarnate. He's I get it, man. I get it. He's water. You probably don't want to hang with him in the cafeteria. Stop spouting weird crap. Sun whispered to his partner that he knew was going on deaf ears. Neptune had that triggered look in his eyes that constricted his pupils and made the usual cool blue-haired dude nothing but a sniveling mess of a number of hours. Sun sighed and forfeited his attempts to pacify his partner before turning back to the ring in time to see the next contestant getting picked. Next up to the spar will be Mr. Russell Thrush. The Cardinal member stood up and psyched himself up with some cheers from the rest of his teammates. And then his opponent shall be Mr. Gara Sabuku. The viewing seat suddenly exploded with cheers and calls from the students of Shade. They called out to their fellow vacuum student as he stepped up from his seat and made his way down the stairs. Weiss looked around curiously at the sudden response and tilted her head. Well, he certainly seems popular, and they are especially loud. Go, Gara, and show them the fruits of our labor. Let them see just how our training has benefited us in the quest to become the greatest hunters alive. Ren, look, it's that Lee guy we met the other day. So cool, they're on the same side. The young man in question finally stepped out into the ring to face Russell directly. He had a dark red hair and a pair of small round ears sticking out in them. The young man had dull green irises and thick black rings surrounding his eyes. He wore a crimson long sleeve shirt with a mesh undershirt visible underneath it. Attached to his belt was a small brown guard. He wore long crimson pants that were ragged and torn around his ankles and sandals on his feet. And the people watching him couldn't help but notice the patch of scar tissue just above his eye. The young man slowly stepped out onto center stage and faced Russell directly in silence. The dual dagger wielder gulped and tried to steel himself under the unscrupulous gaze of the redhead. He didn't look confident or arrogant or bored while facing the beacon student. He just looked neutral while facing his opponent in battle. But the stands were more than ready to pick up the noise on his half. You can do it, Gara. Teach him a lesson, boss. Show these kids what vacuum's got. That's enough, all of you. Glinda's voice carried over the amphitheater and made the rowdy students quiet down. She sternly glared around at the students that continued to raise noise before sighing and flicking to her scroll. It's time we start this match. Ready? Russell raised his daggers cautiously as he stared his enemy down. Gara slowly lowered his body and prepared himself defensively while narrowing his eyes on his opponent. Begin! Russell immediately made the first move and leapt off the ground. He jumped towards Gara and hurled up into curled up into a ball, his daggers pointing out to shred through anything that stood in his way. The red Faunus was quick to move to the side as Russell's spinning form flew by him. Russell stretched out and slid out over the stage before running towards Gara again. The lanky mohawked student lashed for the redhead's eyes, but missed by an inch as Gara leaned back. Russell turned and spun on the ball of his foot, holding his blades out and forcing Gara to jump to avoid the daggers. Russell quickly kicked up his feet and somersaulted to catch his foe. The raccoon found his ducking aside to avoid his sudden kick. Gara pulled his gourd off his belt and held it by its strap as Russell turned towards him. He raised his gourd and blocked the dagger before ducking beneath the other when it came around for a following swing. The gourd held up splendidly against the fierce swings of the daggers as Gar easily warded off Russell's attacks. The beacon student lunged with his blades and Gar dodged and slid by his arm. Gar yelled and slammed his hand into Russell's chin while kicking into the back of his leg. Russell dropped to the ground and gasped when his back hit the stage. Gar quickly followed through and threw his gourd out, watching it wrap around the beacon freshman's leg before pulling and throwing him across the stage. Go, Gar! You can do it! Come on, Russell! Cardinal needs a win! The Mohawk team picked himself up and frowned before swinging his daggers to the side. The revolvers at the base of the blade spun before he pointed the daggers at Gara and fired balls of fire dust at him. The redhead narrowed his eyes before ducking to the side and weaving through the flame shots. Stop dodging, asshole! Gara pulled out the cork and swung his gourd, letting water splash out into an oncoming fireball and momentarily covering them both in steam. Russell closed his eyes from the sudden rush of heat before a hand reached out to him and grabbed the handle of one of his daggers. He quickly pulled it back before Gara could yank it out of his hand and waved his other dagger out to release a point-blank blast of fire. Gara raised his gourd to block before slipping in and grabbing the other handle as well. Let's go! Let go! Russell slammed his forehead into Gara's chin and forced the redhead to step back. With his opponent momentarily stunned, the beacon student prepared to finish the match, but heard something loud drop by his feet. He looked down to see both blades and both revolvers cluttered on the ground by his feet. Russell blinked in confusion before looking down at his hands and opened them to see dust fall from his palm. What? Don't be distracted. The beacon freshman looked up just as Goddard kicked him in the face and knocked him to the ground. Russell slammed into the floor bodily as an alarm went off overhead. The match is concluded. Mr. Thrasher's aura has fallen to the red. The winner of this match is Mr. Sabuku. The people in the stands clapped and cheered for the Faunus' victory. Gar took it in stride, casually walking off the stage as Russell moaned and lifted himself up. Tintin blinked in surprise as she watched the defeated beacon student pick up the pieces of his weapon. How did he break those daggers? I didn't see him do anything. I didn't either. Pyrrha shook her head. One moment those swords were together and the next they weren't. And did he seriously fight with just a water bottle? Yeah, I wanted to see a really cool weapon. Ruby bemoaned before hunched over and sulking. I thought he'd have a gun that turns into a pair of gauntlets, or a sword that shoots smaller swords, or maybe there would be like a gravity dust in his canteen that makes his enemy fly or something. I hope the next fight is just a little more interesting. Miss Ruby Rose, yes. The hooded girl jumped to her feet in panic. Sorry, Miss Goodwitch. I'll make sure to talk. I'll make sure not to talk while you're picking contestants anymore. No, Miss Rose, I am calling you up to fight. There was a round of laughter through the stands as Ruby's face glowed red from embarrassment. But I would like it if you kept that same mindset in check for the future. Yes, ma'am. Well, you heard her, sis. Yang and a couple more of her friends snickered and chuckled at her circumstances as her blush darkened and arms shook at her side. The blonde sister weathered Ruby's indignant slaps and continued laughing. She's calling for you. You guys are the worst. Ruby marched off in a huff and stomped her feet down the stairs. But while the youngest friend went to go fight and the others laughed at her reaction, Blake stared at the stage and thought. Her eyes drifted over to that raccoon boys team to see that only one of them remained in the stands. Her eyes narrowed with intent. Didn't he look familiar? Hunting, stupid, dumb, Yang can't make jokes, so she has to laugh at me. I'm gonna stick her with all the laundry jobs for the rest of the week. The young leader continued to bristle as she made her way to the lockers. Her hair started to burn as she was reminded of all the times in classes and back in Signal when she made a fool of herself. All the time the teachers was talking or calling her and she was distracted to even notice. That usually left her mortified, and it always happened. When she was back in Signal, her dad, Yang, and Uncle Crow raised the point that maybe she should be tested to see if she had problems concentrating. However, they never got around to it because her dad was too distracted shopping online. Yang was texting with her friends, and Uncle Crow just slouched on the couch with his flask. Maybe it was a family thing. Open your mouth. I'm fine. I know, but I still want to check it. Ruby came back from her thoughts after hearing the unfamiliar voices. The little red-haired girl slid up to the lockers and peeked around the corner to see the boy that just finished the fighting being surrounded by a taller boy and girl. Ruby quirked an eyebrow as the Faunus opened his mouth to let the girl look inside. Okay, nothing broken and no bleeding. I guess that headbutt was just superficial damage. Yeah, but that don't look superficial. The other boy pointed towards the redhead's hand before he immediately hit it behind his back. The older boy sighed and grabbed Gara's arm before raising it up to see his knuckles and palm. You got some burns from blocking that fireball. You're lucky he was using a crystal, or your arms would be charred if he had been using powder. And Gara, why didn't you use your semblance? You know how they all would have reacted if I did. The stoic red-haired boy responded as he noticed the distressed and concerned looks on their faces. I'm sorry, but using it would have only caused people to freak out and be scared of me. That's not what we need right now. Remember how people used to look at me when I first started to do it? I don't want to bother you both and leave with those kind of looks while we're here. The girl looked dissatisfied with his answer, but the older boy just chuckled and shook his head. That's the same reason you gave last time the festival was going around. I thought you'd steal up a little over the years. Gar gave the older boy a sorry shake, and he accepted it with a laugh. All good, little brother. We'll trust you. Just do it now to ease the pain. The sandy blonde girl spoke up as the two boys looked at her oddly. The older girl crossed her arms and scowled as they flinched back. You give me one more excuse and I'll kick your ass so hard you do it every time you see my boot. Ruby peeked her head out a little further and watched as the red-haired Faunus nodded and stepped back from them. With him standing by himself, Ruby realized she might have spotted him once, a bit before the last semester had ended. Before she could think about it any further, Silver eyes widened as a soft brown light started to emanate from his body before he seemed to burst into light. It was just like Naruto and that Faunus at the docks. She covered her mouth to stifle the soft gasp that escaped her mouth, but it was still light enough for the aura-clad boy to drop his cover and the vacuum students to come together. Ruby was hidden behind the wall and quickly panicked before she stomped her feet to feign her walking. She came around the corner and huffed, "Stupid Yang laughing at me! I'm gonna get back at her, so..." "Oh, hello," she waved as the older students looked at her oddly. The shorter girl suddenly felt very awkward and just chuckled nervously. Hi, I'm Ruby. It's nice to have you here at Beacon." "Tamari," the older girl answered while crossing her arms and stepping up to look over the shoulder of the shorter girl. Ruby shrunk down under her serious gaze before she finally spoke again. "You look really young to be in this school." I'm 15, Ruby spoke up. When the scary, blunt girl looked back at her, she flinched, but continued. "I was accepted here early by the headmaster. That's why I look so young, because I am." "And I thought only Vacuo was crazy enough to accept people early, and I thought we were special. Nice to meet you, kid. The name's Kankuro." And Ruby looked up at the black-haired boy who had paint around his face before he jerked his head to the side. "And sorry we're distracting you. We'll be on our way. Hey, Gar, you might not even hold the record anymore." Kankuro laughed his way out, and Tamari walked with a shrug, while the raccoon Faunus stayed behind. Ruby realized the intimidating Faunus had lingered back to stare at her before he stepped forward. Ruby was concerned that she might have done something to anger him before his voice came out in a quiet but firm tone. "Don't be afraid. I know how it might seem intimidating to be accepted ahead of time, but if they did that, then they have faith in you, and so do all the people around you. Be strong, and be prepared to show that strength on the way ahead." Ruby blinked in surprise as Gar walked past her and made his way out. Was he cheering her on? "Miss Rosa, I'm not sure what is distracting you, but we are waiting." "Yes, ma'am." "Hunting? So you're saying you saw that guard guy do the same thing Naruto and all the other Faunus Blake was talking about can do? The noble guards?" She quickly corrected her partner's gross simplification before turning to her leader once again. "But are you sure, Ruby?" "Yeah, pretty sure." The hooded leader nodded as she was surrounded by all of her friends after telling them what she saw. They waited until after the matches were finished to bring her aside and get her full account of what happened. "One moment he was just normal, and then he wasn't. But you're sure it was like this?" Naruto raised his arm and covered it in aura again as it flickered like fire over his forearm. "I'm sorry, but you have to be sure." "I am. Just like that, but brownish. And it wasn't just the aura. He had injuries too, like his aura didn't protect him or something, just like you." Naruto vanquished his cloak and looked Ruby in the eyes before nodding. "Okay, she's right. Not just anybody can do those things. He's one of them." "Alright, so we know this guard guy is one of those guards. What does that mean?" And Yang questioned. I mean, that doesn't automatically make him evil or anything, does it?" "No, of course it doesn't, but it means he's a person of interest, and as we've learned from the White Fang rally, they've been searching for others like that too. He might not just be a person of interest." Naruto looked over at Blake and saw her nod in agreement. "Me and Blake saw these two Faunus at the rally talking to each other. One of them stepped up and covered himself in aura, and Kushwick said he was one of the Majesties, and then he looked back to the other guy and said they were recruiting more. He had red hair and ears on his head too." "You're saying he's already part of the White Fang?" "Probably," Blake answered, but shook her head. "But we have to be certain. We still don't know anything about this Gar person to make any kind of decision, and I doubt we're going to find any kind of articles or newspaper clipping about one man. So is socializing not even anywhere in that skill set you got through around. You got throwing around, because I got to worry about your future as a huntress if you can't even go around talking to people." Blake flinched, and they all turned around to see Sun's grin brightly, and Neptune stand confidently beside him as the Haven students joined them. "You guys talking about that guard dude, right? Do you know him?" "Not really, but I heard his name a few times when I still lived in Bakuyo." The monkey shrugged. "Although considering how a few of these other team cheered for him, he sounds like some big shot. So he's probably important. Is he important?" "Yeah." Naruto nodded. "How do you think we should get anything on him?" "I told you, socialize him." "Hunting, Jugo, hang on." The massive taciturn man turned around to see his diminutive new friend come to a quick stop by his side. Her team and the two tag-alongs followed up behind her before stopping and marveling at the large frame of the older exchange student. Ruby craned her neck back and asked her new friend, "Jugo, you're from Shade, right? I was telling my friends, I haven't even introduced you yet. Everyone, this is my new friend, Jugo Willing. Jugo, this is my team, and our friend Sunny Neptune. And she was not kidding about the big as a Beowulf bit. Young whispered between her teammates as they all shook their heads, or the twitchy thing either. After the large orange-haired boy had shaken his head, Ruby looked up and asked, Jugo, and can we talk to some of your teammates about something? It's kind of important. Can you text them or something? Hey, it's the Wonder Kid from Beacon everyone's been talking about. The girl looked over to see a trio coming down the path to greet them. Once they stopped, the girls recognized the boy as the one they saw fighting and caught in earlier, the wiry young man with the sharp teeth that turned to water. Behind him was a girl with bright red hair and glasses, and standing behind them was another redhead who looked like she would explode on anyone who attempted to speak to her. The white-haired boy smiled. If I knew you were Jugo's new friend, I would have met you sooner. You're part of Jugo's team. I'm the leader, Sugetsu Hosuki, leader of Team Scout. The boy pointed it at himself before turning to the two girls behind him. The one with the stupid haircut and glasses is Karen Hill. The girl lashed out with a fist that blew his face off, getting all the other students to jump back in surprise before the water gathered up again, and he carelessly shrugged. She does that a lot, and the one back there looking like she's crushing a rock between her buns is the Kari. She's not very friendly. Fuck off, you soggy sack dickhead. Ruby's son and Neptune blinked in surprise at the short girl's sharp language and the complete lack of shock on her teammates' faces. Ruby looked back at her team and saw them shrug in response before she continued. Anyway, I'm Ruby Rose, and it's nice to meet you. Your team's from Shade, right? We were wondering if we could ask you a couple of questions about another team at your school, the one led by that Gotta guy. Okay, well, this sounds like a total waste of time. Tayo groaned. Hey, Damascus, I'm not gonna waste another breath gossiping with the brat and her color-coded posse while the ripe monkey and corny blueberry gawk on the side. So I'm going back to the room, crashing on my bed, and if you fuckers wake me up, I swear your water trick ain't gonna save you from me making you into a girl. Tayo dragged her feet past them and headed for the dorms. As the Beacon and Haven students gasped in shock, Yang was the first to recover, coughing into her hand before shrugging. Okay, so she's a character. And that was the thing. Yes, I'd say she's just in a mood, but she's always a complete bitch. She almost started a fight the other day, and we'd have been screwed if not for the timely intervention of that student. Karen coughed and tried to ignore the color in her cheeks. So what is it you want to know about Gar exactly? And Blake stepped forward to carry the conversation. We want to ask you a few questions about him and his team. Can you tell us a little about them? Not really much to tell, Sugetsu shrugged. He's pretty popular with students from Vacuo, but I guess you wouldn't really know about that. Basically, the team leads the rest of the students when we have to fight. Vacuo has a lot of sudden grim attacks that can cause real trouble, and we need to act fast. So when we have to go out there and fight, the team acts like the vanguard. It's not official. Karin fixed her glasses. We don't treat them like the heads of the school or anything, but a lot of students respect them. Even other upperclassmen depend on them for help and guidance. People in Vacuo don't really like being bossed around, but they do appreciate people that they can trust and to have their backs in a crisis. That's why people in Shade trust them. Ruby looked back to her friends and saw their surprised expression after hearing Scout's words. She said goodbye to Jugo and his teammates before she and her friends made their way back to the school. Once they were alone, the little redhead sighed and thought back to the suspicious man in question. He certainly seemed intimidating, and Ruby would be lying if she said she didn't feel like she had swallowed her tongue facing the faunus, but the way he interacted, she interacted so sincerely with those other two from his team, seemed just like he did when she was with Yang, Blake, and Weiss. And so anyone else feel guilty for suspecting this guy? And Sun hunched over and shook his head as his tail hung limply behind him. They sound like good guys. What do you think, Neptune? Ocean on feet. He's an ocean on feet. He's an ocean on feet. He's an ocean on feet. Not him. Sun ignored the repeatedly traumatized mutterings of his partner to turn towards the Beacon girls. What do you girls think? They certainly sound good. Weiss nodded. But we can't be sure simply from conversation with a third party. We came to get information, not make a decision about whether we stop our investigation after our first reconnaissance. Yeah, but maybe he wasn't always a member of the White Bang. Yan pointed out. Maybe he only started getting into contact with them after he came to Vale. That's possible, but until we're certain, we can't rule out the possibility that he's already a member. We should know better than anybody that some members can hide themselves in the open. former members. Wise spoke after Blake had finished her point. The sneaky girl crossed her arms. Don't sell yourself or Naruto short just to prove a point. Blake nodded apologetically. Sorry, but we still need more evidence of who he is. Let's just hope the others are getting something as well. Hunting. Oh yeah, Tamara and her team are the best. She hangs out with us sometimes when classes are let out, so she's an upperclassman. That's right. Nebula, the leader of Team Indigo, told Sasuke as they sat together and ate in the cafeteria. The shade student was skeptical about letting this other student suddenly sit with them, and even more suspicious when he started raising questions about another team from the school, probably getting information for the tournament soon. She wanted to wave him off, but the rest of her team invited him to sit down, whispering something about finally getting to talk with a hottie from the Beacon. Hottest students, Reddit thread. The leader sighed in defeat as the girls forced him to sit. Oh well, maybe they could get some information back from him in return. That was all they needed. Definitely not because he was very pleasant to look at. She was much more professional than that. The entire team is already in their third year, Octavia said as she slid up closer to Sasuke's side to get his attention. Team Gradient got accepted a few years earlier, and everyone started watching them. It's thanks to them that so many people in Shade think they can still be hunters. What do you mean? Sasuke questioned. Gwen took a bite from her pizza. Vecchio doesn't have as many resources as it used to. Either it's used up what it had, or anything it has left is being dug up and taken out of the kingdom. If we wanted to make a weapon as fancy or capable as the ones for Beacon, Haven, or Atlas, we had to have both money and connections. A lot of people lost the nerve to join the academy when they realized they couldn't make weapons that could wipe out Grimm in a single hit. And Gradient can change that. Yep. Gwen smiled. When we joined, we saw just what people with the bare minimum could do. They only had fans or their fist or whatever they could find and prove all they needed were the skills were their skills to protect people. After that, most of the school was fine with what they had. We made do with our staves, our knives, our swords, and proved that we could do anything. It was true that Vecchio students had to use more basic weaponry than other schools. He doubted he ever saw someone from Shade that had complex mecha shift weapons, a plethora of dust rounds at their disposal, or anything even close to a giant scythe. It was actually pretty damn respectable. They didn't have the resources for weapons like other schools in order to compensate for a student's lack of ability or weapons. In order to thrive, they had to trust and hone their own abilities and survive in a wasteland filled with tough living conditions and grim. The students of Shade were capable than many people gave them credit, but he wasn't here to praise another school. He was here for information. That's pretty admirable, Sasuke noted before looking between the girls. And what about the members of the team? What are they like? Octavia looked up and thought, well, Tamari is pretty cool, but she can be stern when she has to be. She sort of just stares at someone, and that makes them stop whatever they're doing. Kankuro pretty much keeps to himself. He doesn't hang out with anyone but his teammates. Lee trains a lot, and she looked around her table, and there was a resounding wave of silent nods from her team. Yeah, he's weird. And Gar doesn't usually socialize. He keeps quiet most of the time, and only really speaks up when he needs to. You might think he was creepy at first, side, but he can actually be really nice. Sorry, but what is this about? Nebula leaned forward and looked Sasuke into his eyes. Is there a reason you're asking about them? We're interested. We saw his fight earlier with one of our teammates and wanted to know what he could do. Sasuke lied with the excuse he had made up in case this line of questioning ever came up. I was interested in hearing about his skills and abilities. That's what I figured, Nebula nodded before smirking. Well, just so you know, we aren't giving him up like that, and even if you knew, you wouldn't have a way to beat him. Fair enough. I guess we'll just have to see when the time comes. Sasuke got out of his chair, but was immediately pulled back into it. He saw Octavia holding onto his arm. You can't leave just yet. You still have to, trade numbers with us. Gwen blurted out while holding up her scroll. You came to talk to us, and you think we don't get anything in return? No, sir. Yeah, numbers. Mine first. Sasuke was forced to trade his information. Was the excited girls before they looked at the leader. Nebula, you can trade numbers with Sasuke too. Don't see why I have to. Nebula coughed before pulling hers out as well. Then again, maybe we can glean some information off of him next time to make it even. We'll give you a call sometime when we want to talk, or whenever you want to talk with us. Don't be a stranger. Sasuke bid his goodbyes as the girls waved him goodbye. He made his way out of the cafeteria and came to meet the faces of his grinning teammates. He frowned. I still don't see why I had to be the one that went to ask them. It would be fairly obvious why you had to be the one to ask them. Naruto smirked. We'll just have to make sure that Wise doesn't hear about this, or she'll throw a fit. Why'd you bring up Wise? No reason, but we're still not gonna tell her because she's totally gonna be pissed. Agreed. Oh yeah. So this guy turned cold, but he just sighed and gave up on the little joke. I couldn't get anything substantial from them. Nothing about his build, his habits, or any sudden changes he's gone through. They seem content talking about the team and what they've done for the other students. To the inside, geez, and I thought we were getting better at the information gathering game, and God knows we did it more than enough. No, Nora might be our best chance, Kiba said. She told me she was going to try meeting with her friend from his team tomorrow. She tried finding him today, but apparently he was out running a few laps in the Emerald Forest. If that's going to be our best chance, then I'm happy to let Nora and the rest of Juniper handle him. We got to be careful. Naruto muttered. When we confront Gaara, we need to prepare for how he might react. I don't know what he can do, but if he can destroy weapons and beat someone with a gourd, then we should be careful. So, Tenten inquired, what are we going to do if we confront him and he isn't part of the White Fang? If he isn't, and he's just considering joining, then we'll convince him not to. Tell him they're just lying to him, so he would join their cause. The White Fang are only trying to hurt people, and they're planning something much worse too. If we can get someone else from the Noble Guard on our side, then that'll be a blow to Torchwick and the White Fang. And if he's already a member, Naruto's eyes narrowed, then I'm going to make him tell me everything he knows, everything I want to know. Hunting, Gaara moved through the streets of Bell at night as he made his way to the rendezvous point. He was going back to the warehouse anytime soon. Nobody was. After the chaos that unfolded at the rally and the sudden activity of the mech that tore through the warehouse and toppled it over, the authorities were more prevalent in that area now. So now he had to go to an unfamiliar part of the city he didn't know his way around to meet with the representative. Although the city was beautiful, much different from Bakuo and its landscape. No sand to drag your feet in, or sweltering heat to bear down on you. Although he would be lying if he said he wasn't missing the familiar stomping ground. He walked into an open park and watched dozens of people happily talk and pass each other along the way. A few of them were couples enjoying the sight of the sun setting over the buildings. His eyes panned over the space before spotting his target sitting on a bench. He sat down beside his fellow redhead and leaned back into the seat. What is it, Roshi? You sound unenthused. You called me out here rather abruptly, and now we're just sitting on a bench. I'd like to know what was so important that you need me here so soon. Very well, I suppose that's fair. His representative from the White Fang, an old ape faunus with a big bushy red beard, groaned as he sat up in his seat. Gaara was surprised to learn that there were other people in the world who had abilities like his, and even more surprised when he actually got to meet one of them. Roshi had showed him his semblance, and Gaara was surprised to see what an old man without much combat experience was capable of doing just by walking. The ape ran a hand through his hair. The leaders are excited at the prospect of you joining us. Many people will look up to someone like you, a figure the faunus can look to for guidance, and a warrior to lead the charge against our growing enemies. I think you greatly overestimate my abilities. I think you greatly underestimate your own. Gaara shook his head. So when can I meet the leader of this operation? In due time. Roshi was quick to respond. There's something else you need to do before I can introduce you to them. You're currently in Beacon right now, correct? Does it have something to do with that Roman Torchwick was spotting off in the rally, having to watch the crook with his face plastered across all of Vale's media and rise in an audience of angry faunus was equal parts astonishing and disturbing? Your flattery is appreciated, but I'm not going to bring down the school by myself, nor am I going to assassinate a headmaster or a military general. We aren't asking that. That's too much to ask of anyone, not to mention it would be dangerous to lose powerful figures like that so quickly when we aren't sure how the remaining power would react. react. No, we aren't going to ask that of you. Then what are you asking me to do? Right now, in Beacon, there are two people of interest the White Fang has their eyes on. The heirs to the Schneidus company that has denied our people their basic rights and treated them like second-class citizens, and one of the few remaining descendants of the Uchiha bloodline, that damnable clan that hunted faunus and treated our deaths like sport. And they're in the school right now. We want you to bring them to us. Why? This new girl should be fairly obvious. If we have her, we can make demands of the SDC, force them to improve work conditions, increase wages for work faunus, make them admit their previous transactions against our people. I'm not sure you are aware of this, but there's a group of people called themselves Uchiha that have been opposing us for a number of years. Among them is a real Uchiha survivor, someone we believe to be closely related to the boy from Beacon. We believe we can smoke them out if we have him in our grasps. Extortion, terrorist threats, and there was little doubt when those Uchihas were outed, then they would simply be captured and kept in a cell. Guard looked ahead. I would need some time to apprehend them. You have less than 24 hours. Guard looked at Roshi in silent surprise before the ape stood up from his seat. I'll be contacting you soon, but where you need to bring them, I'm sure you have the skills to carry it out. That's too fast, and we are on a timetable. We need to act fast, and we need to ask the same of you, Gara. Roshi looked down at the boy as Gara narrowed his eyes. This was a test. They were making him take action now. They wanted to see what he did next. I would get started. Your clock starts now. Extra confined with fear. Come on. Damn it. The stupid thing is busted. As we get to punch the elevator door before stepping back and leaning against the wall, he looked at the other victim of their unfortunate circumstances. Dude, you don't have to be so scared. I'm sure they'll fix it soon enough. Yeah, totally. The shaky man pushed into the wall away from him. You gonna be okay? You look like you really need to take a piss. I might, but no reason for you, no reason, but not for the reason you think. All right, we'll hold it just a little bit longer. They're gonna get us out sooner or later. God, I hope it's sooner. If you're busting, then we can just try doing this ourselves. So he gets to step up to the center of the elevator and come his hands together. You can step up on here and reach for the latch on the roof. Yeah, good idea. But how about we concentrate more on the floor like this? He pulled his weapon out of his back and fired a blast of concentrated electricity into the floor, blowing out a hole that emptied out into a bottomless darkness. He happily jumped in and went plummeted into nothingness. See you later. So we get to stare down in shock before he heard a ding to the elevator. The doors opened to several workers standing outside it before his son stepped forward. Was my partner in here? He was. So we get to shrug and pointed down, but he went that way. Of course. If he does something else super stupid, then I'm never gonna forgive him. Meanwhile, multiple levels down. Well, hey there, gorgeous. You're looking super sexy in that tank top and skirt. Neptune got his confidence back after falling hundreds of feet down the shaft and ending up where he was. His worker came back just in time to hit on the babe in front of him. Love the tanning booth you're in, but maybe you should get out of here. You should get some air, huh? He pressed the button on the top open so that the girl inside was open to walk. Neptune smiled. So, what's your name? He was cut off when a massive explosion echoed out from the other end of the hall. The smoke cleared and cinders swayed out with fire dancing over her hand. Found you. Well, I'm more popular than I thought. Cool guy act is totally working for me. Neptune smiled and stepped down. One at a time, ladies. One at a time. Hunting. End of chapter 56.